You're listening to an Ono Media podcast. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Into the Dark podcast. I am your host, Payton Moreland, and I'm so excited to dive into this episode today with you. But before we get into it, I just wanted to ask, if you are watching on YouTube, can you please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode? And if you are listening on podcast and can leave me a review, that would be so helpful. And then just for everyone listening, if you could just share this podcast with your best friend, that would be so super helpful. Thank you guys so much. Let's get into my 10 seconds. We have obviously been streaming on Twitch, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of the listeners and watchers out there who are coming and joining our live stream on Twitch. They have been so fun, very therapeutic for me. I feel like the chat is so intimate, and it's really just been a whole new experience for me that honestly is the thing I look forward to the most in my week. So thank you again. If you don't know, the times we stream on Twitch are Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. PT and then Thursday nights at 5:30 PT. It's fun. We kind of just hang out. We talk true crime. We talk haunted, spooky stuff. We watch body cam footage. It really is such a good time. So if you haven't joined, please do check it out. Now let's get into the episode. So I think every single one of us has been in a situation where we see something online that confuses us. Maybe it's a pop culture reference, but you've never seen that movie or TV show. Or maybe it's a meme that you haven't been following, so you don't even know what it's about. There are definitely some parts of web culture that can be utterly baffling to outsiders. And if you want to understand some posts on social media, you might have to go down a rabbit hole and play detective to piece everything together. But stick with me. Imagine you try to do that, and you end up seeing a confusing image on an online forum, and you start investigating. And you investigate, and then the mystery ends up taking over your entire life. And that's what happens in today's story. So let's get into it. This is what happened to Marcus Warner. So he was actually 15 years old, and he had 5 younger siblings all living together in a small town in Virginia. His parents homeschooled their children and kept them busy with extracurriculars like Boy Scouts and piano lessons. And Marcus grew up in a very strict home in Virginia. So even though Marcus was computer savvy and he did like surfing online, I think as any homeschooled kid would love to do, he actually needed to check with his mom and dad before he did anything. And this was even if he just wanted to send a quick email. Marcus actually had to ask for their permission first. And it's not like it would have been easy for him to sneak around behind their back and get online without them noticing, because the family's computer sat in the living room where anyone could walk up behind him and see what he was up to. And I think this was very common before 2010. There was definitely one family computer. I know we had one that sat in the computer room, and you had to take turns using the computer. And if dad was using the computer for work, you definitely couldn't get on. I remember me and my sister would play Club Penguin on our family computer, and we actually put a virus on my dad's computer. So then we got banned from the family computer. But luckily for Marcus, that doesn't happen, because in 2012 is when Marcus's parents decided that he had earned the right to a little bit of privacy. He's 15, it's 2012, so they get him his own laptop. Now, Marcus was a good kid overall. He didn't want to do anything illegal or scandalous with the laptop, but he was also curious about those parts of the internet that his parents might not approved of him being on. Places like 4chan, which is a free-for-all forum where people can post pretty much whatever they want. And this can include racist memes, pornography, very disturbing content. And I don't want to make it sound like every single post on 4chan is offensive or inappropriate. Some of it is fine, but it was definitely the kind of website that his parents would not have approved of if they knew what Marcus was up to. So 15-year-old Marcus uses his laptop to go onto 4chan whenever his parents weren't keeping such a close eye on him. And on January 7th, 2012, when he logged on, he saw a post that really caught his attention. It was actually something that had gone up 3 days earlier, so back on January 4th, and it was making a pretty big splash. Someone had posted an image of a black box with white text that said, "Hello, We are looking for highly intelligent individuals. To find them, we have devised a test. There is a message hidden in this message. Find it, and it will lead you on the road to finding us. We look forward to meeting the few that will make it all the way through. Good luck, 3301. Now, that was it. That was the message posted on 4chan. But Marcus was intrigued, which was a bit of a surprise to him because he didn't usually care that much about internet games and riddles. In fact, a lot of the time he thought those kinds of ciphers and puzzles could be sloppy. Marcus was very into coding and programming, and it kind of annoyed him when he'd look at a challenge only to see messiness just below the surface. That kind of ruined all the fun for him. But this riddle drew him in specifically because it wasn't sloppy. There was a cleanness and almost professionalism to it, and that set it apart from the other posts that Marcus would usually ignore. And even better, when he decided to try and solve it, Marcus actually knew exactly what to do, and so did a lot of other people who saw it. And before long, there was a huge race to see who could find the hidden message first. And I have to tell you, the solution would not have been easy or obvious to most people. Have you ever opened a file in the wrong program only to end up with a page of gibberish instead of whatever you were trying to look at? Sometimes people actually do that on purpose. They'll create a file that, when opened in the wrong kind of program, displays text. And the text isn't nonsense, it's a secret message. So that was the solution to this specific puzzle. If you actually saved that black box with white text on your computer as an image and then opened it in a program called Notepad, it would display a long string of letters and numbers. And at first glance, again, this could have easily been mistaken as just gibberish, but they were actually written in a hidden code. And if someone managed to decipher them, those letters actually revealed a URL. And if the code breaker were to paste that URL into a browser, it would lead to another image with another puzzle on it. And that was all just the first step of this puzzle. It only got even more complex and challenging from there. The new image could only be solved by running the file through a different program, one that was specifically designed for puzzle making and puzzle solving. And just like with the last cipher, this one only led to yet another code for everyone to break. And then again, that led to another one, and on it went. One puzzle featured a string of over 100 numbers, which corresponded to the specific words in a particular book. Now, people like Marcus had to figure out which book to use and then look up the specific message word by word. One puzzle required people to call a particular phone number, and then they'd hear a recording that gave them a math problem they had to solve to get to the next step.
Very good, you have done well. There are 3 prime numbers associated with the original final .jpg image. 3301 is one of them. You will have to find the other 2. Multiply all 3 of these numbers together and add a .com on the end to find the next step. Good luck. Goodbye.
Another made them go to specific coordinates in the real world and scan QR codes that were posted in public. I really can't overstate how complicated this entire setup was. It was round after round, like lasting an entire month. But along the way, Marcus made one big breakthrough. So in one of the puzzles, he actually decoded the name of the person or group who had set all of this up. And they called themselves Cicada 3301. Now, of course, it would have been impossible for any one person to solve all of these puzzles on their own, and Marcus realized that too. So even though he was a very talented and devoted code breaker, he just couldn't do it alone. It seemed like these puzzles had been designed specifically to encourage collaboration, and along the way, he met other code breakers who were also trying to solve these codes from 4chan. And he figured out with these people what this whole Cicada situation was anyways, like what is the point of all this? Eventually, he teamed up with about 10 people he'd never met in real life, people who literally lived in other countries like Norway or Chile, and they called their team Pound Decipher. But even with all of these other people helping him, Marcus found that all of his time and energy began to be consumed by the Cicada puzzles. One time he actually stayed up for at least 30 hours straight, pushing himself to find a solution that was just out of reach. And when he went to a piano lesson that same day, he was too exhausted and distracted to focus on the music. His teacher could tell something was off, but when they asked Marcus what was going on, he wouldn't give them a straight answer. He didn't feel like he could talk to anyone in his real life about Cicada 3301. In part, he was probably worried about his parents taking away his internet privileges. I mean, what does all this even mean? But also, everything about this group had been so mysterious and hidden since the beginning. It's possible that Marcus felt like this was a secret he had to keep, even if that meant no one in his real life could know why he was growing increasingly obsessive, staying up all night and spending all of his free time online. Now, as the days went on, things got even worse for him. He slept less and less, and he eventually began passing out unexpectedly because his body just couldn't go another second without sleep. He began skipping meals to continue working on puzzles, which led to him becoming thin and weak. And Marcus wasn't the only person who was paying the price. Another member on his team, Pound Decipher, had to go see a vision expert because he had damaged his eyes by staring at his computer screen for too long. So in other words, Cicada was almost destroying Marcus's life and his teammates' lives too. But all the sacrifices they were making must have seemed worth it. I mean, everyone figured after all of this time and energy, there just had to be an incredible prize at the end of all of these puzzles and games. Once they solved everything, they would be rewarded. And if nothing else, it would just be nice to solve the mystery of what all of this was about. So even though he didn't understand what he was getting into, Marcus kept solving the puzzles. He followed the clues, he chased the leads, and finally, he got to the end. He solved the last riddle, and it didn't lead to any new images or codes or games. Cicada 3301 had been his one sole obsession for an entire month. But now, all he could do was wait and see if anything got uploaded next. So finally, Marcus got an email on February 6th, 2012, and it told him that he was in. He'd received an invitation to join Cicada 3301. Well, kind of. The sender explained that the group they belonged to wasn't actually called Cicada 3301. Apparently that was just a name they'd created for all those puzzles. In reality, they didn't have a name at all. They were just trying to recruit specific people to their group. They were an elite group that used the internet to advance the causes of liberty, security, and privacy. And because Marcus had finished the games, they wanted him to join them. But he had to agree to two conditions. First, to help advance their beliefs and ensure information was free and uncensored. And second, he had to agree not to do anything illegal while he was part of this group. And this was everything Marcus had been wanting and working for since the beginning of the year. I mean, this was a cool ending to solving these puzzles. But he didn't accept the invitation right away. Instead, he wrote back to ask a question. Not, who are you, or why are you doing this? Instead, he pointed out that he agreed with their beliefs that information should be free. In fact, he believed in that so strongly that he had been pirating media rather than paying for it. So Marcus asked how serious they were about not letting recruits do illegal activity. Like, was it okay for him to keep pirating while he was a part of their group? That was his big, burning question. So rather than answer directly, Cicada sent him an email that included instructions on how to access a secret, hidden, password-protected website. And when Marcus followed those directions, he found himself on a forum with other new recruits to this group, which was still an answer in a way. The point was that now Marcus was definitely one of them. But if Marcus thought he'd finally learn who was behind Cicada and what they were trying to accomplish, he was in for a rude awakening. Even within the group, it seemed like everyone was keeping secrets. And each time Marcus did manage to learn something new about the group, it only raised more questions. For example, he discovered that Cicada had apparently been around for a while. They weren't new. They used to recruit members some other way, using methods that had nothing to do with mysterious online puzzles. But they'd recently decided they wanted more computer experts in their group. It was hard to say why, especially because they must have already had a very strong understanding of code making and code breaking. Otherwise, how could they have created all of those challenging puzzles in the first place? Marcus also didn't know the names of the other new recruits or of the original members who had brought them in. He did recognize a few people who'd been part of Pound Decipher before, but there were 10 or so users on the forum who were complete strangers to him, other people who had apparently passed the puzzles. So now they're all in this recruit forum and they're asking questions. So they claim they weren't terrorists, criminals, or government leaders, but Marcus had no way to know if that was true. He didn't even know how big this group was. Marcus only had access to one part of their forum, but the leaders assured him that there were other chat threads besides his. Plus, they told him some branches of 3301 weren't on this website at all. They had some other way of communicating that Marcus just wasn't allowed to know about. The point was, each group within Cicada was working on its own projects independently. Which brings me to the next odd detail about this story. It sounds like Marcus didn't fully understand what joining Cicada would mean, or what he would be doing as a member, because the truth was, he and other new recruits were actually supposed to figure that out for themselves. The leaders told them that they had the option to collaborate on whatever they wanted. There were no restrictions in terms of how big the project could be, what it was even supposed to achieve. I mean, anything. The new members just had to explain what kind of work they wanted to take on and see if it would fit with Cicada's values. So after a bit of discussion amongst themselves, Marcus and the others proposed something that they called the Cicada Anonymous Key Escrow System, or for short, they called it CAKES. It was a computer program that was supposed to protect whistleblowers. The idea was that if someone had access to dangerous, secret information, they would need a safe way to bring it to light, and they'd also want to protect themselves. Nobody wants to be killed or arrested for exposing wrongdoing in the powerful world. So if a whistleblower put their data into CAKES and they didn't perform some other action in the program within a certain time frame, the information would actually automatically get posted online. So in other words, if that whistleblower was killed or arrested before they could go public, the truth would actually come out anyway. No other program existed that did anything like this. But the problem with creating groundbreaking, game-changing software is it's a lot of work. And Marcus and others obviously aren't being paid for their time. They had lives outside of Cicada, and they were already exhausted from the work it took solving all of those puzzles just to get into the group. Not to mention, some of Marcus's fellow recruits were beginning to become suspicious. They were uneasy that they didn't know who was behind all of this. And they didn't feel good about spending so many hours coding a project for a mysterious group. I mean, are they going to finish and then be kicked out and basically just used for their smart minds? Now you may be thinking, all of these people were expert hackers, right? I mean, they all had access to Cicada's website. They should have been able to get behind the scenes and see what was really going on, or at least who'd actually built the page. But when they tried, the security on this forum was incredible. I mean, even this team of code breakers and puzzle solvers couldn't find any way to get past its very tight privacy settings. In a way, this was even more mysterious. I mean, what is this group? What are they hiding? And maybe even more importantly, if they were capable of building something this advanced, what did they need with Marcus and the others? Why had they all been brought on board to begin with? The more time passed, the more these recruits worried that they weren't going to like the answers, whatever they were. So one by one, different people actually began to quit. Until finally, Marcus was actually the only recruit left. And yet again, he found himself in a situation where he knew he couldn't move forward on his own. I mean, he couldn't make CAKES without help, especially because he was still only 16 years old. And he really wanted some older, more experienced coders to double check his work and make sure it was all correct. But unlike the last time when he'd joined the team Pound Decipher, he couldn't reach out to friends and ask for help. He didn't have the authority on his own to invite anyone to join the group. So instead, he reached out to the mysterious people he'd been working for, and he asked if they would be willing to invite new members in so they could help him. And sure enough, on January 4th, 2013, 1 year to the day after that original recruitment drive began, new puzzles appeared online. Cicada was starting over again, trying to find new code breakers to collaborate with Marcus. But that wasn't the only post about Cicada 3301 that went public on that day. Also on the 4th, someone went into a public forum and shared an anonymous post. They said they were a former member of this group, and when they first joined, they had actually been excited to be a part of something big and meaningful. But after being a part of the group for a while, this anonymous person claimed they began to see some red flags. Namely, Cicada 3301 didn't seem to be a hacker collective or a force for political good. It actually seemed like they were more of a cult that was trying to spread bizarre religious beliefs around the world. And the anonymous post included the words, "I'm here to warn you, stay away." Now, right away, this announcement was very controversial. Some people figured all the claims in it were fake. Somebody had to be making up lies about this Cicada 3301 for attention. But the post included certain details that were oddly specific and accurate. Marcus thought it must have come from someone who really was a part of Cicada. There was no way an outsider could guess at some of the particular claims they made. But still, Marcus didn't believe that he was a part of a cult. He thought they were purposefully spreading misinformation about themselves to scare off possible recruits who weren't going to be all in on the mission. They were trying to avoid what happened last time. Others completely believed all of those claims, though, and they thought Cicada was this secret group behind these puzzles that had some secret religious agenda. After all, those complicated puzzles often included references to occult beliefs and magic. They talked about the Holy Grail and pulled quotes out of spiritual texts. There were other wild theories going around too, like that Cicada 3301 was a government agency, literally the CIA. And to understand that theory, it's helpful to keep in mind what the hacker community was like in 2012 and 2013. I mean, whistleblowers had recently revealed that the US government had been spying on its own citizens. I mean, word got around that the government had been gathering information about people's phone calls, internet browsing, and even what books they were checking out from the library, all without ever publicly explaining that that's what they were doing. So a lot of puzzle breakers and hackers at this time cared deeply about privacy and not being spied on. So when a mysterious group showed up online creating bizarre tests for people to pass, some actually wondered if this was a way for the government to somehow trap or trick the best coders into working for them. Another even more alarming possibility was that Cicada was a terrorist group or a criminal enterprise. A Chilean law enforcement group actually publicly claimed at one point that they knew for a fact that this secret group was breaking the law. But the group denied the accusations. The question was, who should you believe? The police? Cicada? The anonymous person who said they were a cult? I mean, no one actually really knew anything. And the only way to learn more, realistically, was to get through this second recruitment round, solve their puzzles, and hope that satisfying answers laid at the end this time. That year's games and ciphers were just as complicated and challenging as the last year's had been. In fact, Marcus actually had got to help design some of these puzzles. He would reach out to the Cicada higher-ups with ideas about what a good cipher game would look like, and a little while later, he would actually see his work online with countless people all across the world trying to solve it. And there was one big way that this second round of puzzles was actually different from the original game. Apparently, nobody was solving it to Cicada's satisfaction. It's hard to say exactly what went wrong because obviously a secretive group like 3301 isn't going to make a public statement on what happened. Some individuals have claimed that they managed to solve all the riddles. They made it all the way to the end, got all of the right answers, but then never got an invitation to join. Maybe they didn't actually complete the game and there was an additional step that they had all missed. Or perhaps the leaders of Cicada 3301 decided not to bring them on for some mysterious reason. It's kind of hard to say for sure. The point is, with no new recruits, Marcus still didn't have anyone around to help him finish coding cakes, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. So he stopped working on it, hoping he could pick up on the project again when there were more people involved. Instead, in March of 2013, he actually got another mysterious message out of the blue from one of his friends who had also made it into Cicada. It just said, "We've been laid off." And when he tried to log onto the forum that he'd once used to connect with other Cicada members, he couldn't get in. The entire webpage had been taken offline. And that was the end of Marcus's involvement with Cicada. But it wasn't the end of the group itself. Presumably, they did another recruitment drive in 2014. And I say presumably because this one was somehow even more baffling than the previous two. A puzzle went up on January 4th, on the anniversary of when they'd shared the initial puzzles in the other two rounds. But this one was much longer, more complicated than any other cipher that they'd made yet. It was a book, a literal book, called the Liber Primus. It was at least 58 pages long, and every page was full of strange symbols that needed to be deciphered. And well, maybe this puzzle was too hard, even for the elite coders who were attracted to Cicada's games and riddles that they had released over the years. Because a year went by, and then an entire year, and then another year, and nobody cracked the code. And apparently, even the folks at 3301 were getting impatient because they actually tweeted a hint in January of 2015. And even with that hint, the Liber Primus remained a mystery. People chipped away at it for months, decoding a page here and then another page there. And it took forever, and the book was just so long. It still hasn't been solved to this day, even though it's been more than 10 years. You guys, you heard me right. This has been released, and it is unsolved. Maybe it's too hard of a puzzle. As of this recording, 9 pages have been deciphered. That leaves 49 or more that still haven't been unlocked yet. At this rate, the Liber Primus might be solved in another 50 years or so. We're talking 2074. Now, some have speculated that Cicada never meant to recruit anyone with the book. Instead, maybe this was just an elaborate prank, an intentionally impossible cipher that would distract all the people who'd been spending years just trying to learn more about this group. If that's true, it would be an awful lot of work to go to just to troll people. Now, around early 2015, something else interesting happened in this world. You may have noticed everything Cicada 3301 had done so far was shrouded in secrecy. They hid their identities, their goals, even their purpose. Nobody even really knew what this group was or why, and even from the people who eventually joined them. So you may be wondering, how do we know any of this at all? Well, on January 15th, 2015, the Rolling Stone published an interview with Marcus, who had decided to come forward and tell his story. He explained everything he had done, all the way back to puzzle number 1, and described in detail all of his interactions with this mysterious group. Now, that might sound risky, but Marcus said he didn't think he was wrong to go public. After all, if Cicada really did believe in freely sharing information, shouldn't they be fine with Marcus openly discussing his life experiences? Well, it's hard to say, because even to this day, nobody actually knows what Cicada is, and I mean nobody. The reporter who wrote that Rolling Stone article managed to get a CIA recruiter to give him a quote for his story, and the recruiter said, first of all, this random group is not associated with the CIA, and secondly, even the agents at the Central Intelligence Agency couldn't figure out who this group was. It was a mystery to them. So we may actually never know what this secret group, Cicada 3301's, real goals were, why they even existed, why they went to all this effort to do this. But we do know that they actually changed the entire coder community forever. I mean, like I mentioned before, their elaborate puzzles forced people to cooperate and collaborate. They actually helped build a community among people who usually defaulted to being secretive and private. Even better, they encouraged an entire generation to get interested in code breaking and decryption. I mean, the Cicada riddles were big news in certain corners of the internet. And if you were heavy on the internet at this time, you probably knew about them. And a lot of people who had no experience whatsoever with code breaking or puzzle solving checked out their posts just to see what the big deal was. Some kind individuals even taught those newcomers the basics of how to solve these puzzles. And that may not sound like a big deal to you, but today there are real, actual professional computer programmers out there who only ever got interested in the field because of these infamous Cicada 3301 riddles. The group actually pushed some people's lives in an entirely new direction. And that's the power of a good mystery. Now, in this story, as for Marcus, he eventually finished high school and enrolled at Virginia Tech. And there he worked on projects that used gene sequencing technology to help make people healthier. And it might sound like a huge shift, but for Marcus, this was just another way for him to solve complicated codes. And he knew for a fact that if he could find a way to hack DNA, he would actually be able to save lives. He also helped code programs that made it easier for researchers to gather data they needed to improve water conservation systems. It was a healthy, satisfying way to put his problem-solving skills to good work. And after he graduated, he went on to become, what else? A professional coder. He never, ever heard from anyone associated with Cicada ever again. His last contact was from before the forum went offline, and they never explained why they shut the website down without any warning. And they never commented on the public interviews that Marcus gave about his experience with this mysterious group. Now, it's hard to say if they appreciated his boldness and willingness to share the information, or if he made an enemy with that decision. And also, as near as anyone can tell, he also never finished cakes. But he did put the unfinished code somewhere online. Obviously, it's hidden, waiting to be discovered by the next generation's most devoted puzzle solvers. So who knows? Maybe one day you'll be browsing your favorite sites when you decide to click on a new link. And there, you might find this game-changing program tucked away on some obscure corner of the web that Marcus has hidden. Or you might stumble across a confusing image file that has secret messages embedded inside. Maybe even a secret message that you can use to crack the liber primus. The point is, the internet is a strange place, and it's impossible to say with any certainty just what lies in its darkest corners. And that is the dark that we dived into today. I hope to see you guys for our next episode on Into the Dark, and until then, goodbye.